Hello and welcome back to another video in our series called Talkin' Reptiles. I'm Mark Perpetua from Reptile Encounters with my good friends from Hudson Valley Reptile and Rescue. Today I have in front of me a common or green iguana. Very big part of the pet trade for many, many years. But I'd like to talk to you about how laws are changing what we as reptile keepers are allowed to keep moving forward. Iguanas are normally found in Mexico, Central and South America, but thanks to their popularity in the pet trade, they've established themselves a long time ago in places like southern Florida. Yeah, that's right. Where we cruise through the suburbs and see squirrels on the sidewalk, you could be in a suburb of Miami and see two large 5-foot-plus green iguanas fighting it out in a territorial dispute. Yeah, in fact, Florida recently banned the keeping of iguanas, trying to cut back on the numbers that may make it out into the wild. One of the problems with the green iguana is how big they can get. This is a lizard that grows to nearly 6 feet long and has a lot of special requirements. UV lighting and a lot of space, heat, and humidity make it a difficult animal sometimes to keep in your average household. Not to mention, if you don't socialize them, they still have their wild instincts. When they get big, they can bite hard. They have sharp claws as tree climbers. And trust me, that big tail makes an excellent whip. And if you've never been smacked by a big 6-foot lizard's tail, I'm gonna tell you, it can leave a mark. So what happens in some cases is people are unsure what to do with their large, unruly pet reptile. And sometimes these animals end up being released. And that becomes completely irresponsible for two reasons. Here in the north where we live, a green iguana would never survive our cold winters. They probably wouldn't even make it out of the late summer in our cold nights. And then of course down south in the subtropical climate of Miami, they're able to establish themselves and become what are called invasive species. And what an invasive species means is without proper population control, the iguana is able to grow its population and become a competitor. Not only do they become a competitor for certain resources like food, but also for space. I can imagine many native birds and other forms of wildlife of Florida are not going to want to share their home with a large 6-foot lizard that they don't recognize. So yeah, competition is a huge problem for native wildlife if exotics can establish a population where they don't belong. So while we're on the topic of invasive lizards, I have here with me a Tegu lizard. Tegus are native to most of South America. A popular species in the pet trade is the Argentine black and white Tegu. This happens to be a red Tegu, also from the Argentine region, slightly different in color. Regardless, they are very similar in habits and behavior and popularity in the pet trade. But whether it was outside caging in the hot, warmer states of the South, or again, released pets, purposeful or accidental, this has become an increasing problem. While the iguanas are vegetarian and they take up a lot of space and climb trees, the tegus seem a little bit more intimidating because they're ground dwellers. And these guys are roaming in backyards, scaring pets, eating cat food off of people's porches, and can just wreak a lot of havoc on native wildlife. While they won't climb as well as iguanas, they're not opposed to going after a meal if it's a bird or it's eggs, ground nesting birds. And this can be very detrimental to any environment. As much as I love my reptiles, every animal needs to be in an ecosystem where they evolve to keep that proper balance. There are many animals, of course, in my ecosystem here in New York or an ecosystem down in Florida that I don't want to see the wild populations injured. And that's why places like the Hudson Valley Reptile Rescue are super important, giving people an alternative that if something happens in life and they can no longer keep their pet reptile, then it's a very good possibility of a place that can take it in and help find it a suitable home for its future. So that's Talking Reptiles today. Hopefully you learned a little bit about how animals can become invasive, and it's not just reptiles. Another big part is the fish hobby. We have snakeheads that grow nearly 3 feet long and eat all kinds of native fish, living as far north as Maryland waters. Down south, there are cichlids and Oscars that have been released from the pet trade that have made homes in Florida. And a Pacific fish that is now finding its home in the coral reefs of the Caribbean is the lionfish. And the biggest problem with invasive species is native animals normally don't recognize them as a food source and can't control the growth of their population. And I bring that up with the lionfish because in addition to not recognizing them in a new habitat, they are venomous. They have venomous spines, making it very dangerous for any animal that does attempt to eat them. So invasive species come in all types of shapes and sizes, can be done accidental, but it's unfortunate when it happens due to people thinking they're doing the right thing for their pets, including right here at home. If you have a goldfish, find a way to deal with it. Do not release them. The creeks around the Hudson, Esopus, Rondout, believe it or not, are becoming full of goldfish. And while they seem harmless, they eat fish eggs, they eat amphibian eggs, and they do a lot of disturbance in the sediment, creating an environment that's not as suitable for our native fish, especially the game fish like bass and trout that we love to have in our native waters. So I guess we got a little further than just reptiles today, but hey, that's what it's all about when you love nature and love your environment. So thank you for watching Talking Reptiles, once again with myself, Mark Perpetua of Reptile Encounters, and my good friends at Hudson Valley Reptile and Rescue.